everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this video, Saifdean Ammous delves into the intricacies of the gold standard, unraveling its historical significance and enduring impact on global economics. He explores why gold emerged as the backbone of monetary systems, examines its properties that made it ideal for currency, and contrasts it with other metals like silver and copper. Get ready to uncover the fascinating story behind the gold standard and its role in shaping the modern financial landscape.
People choose all kinds of random things as money, bananas maybe even, but then the people who end up making these bad choices don't end up with any wealth left, whereas the people who store their wealth in the things that are hard to make end up maintaining their wealth and maybe even increasing it over time. And of course, this culminated in the 19th century, in the end of the 19th century, by basically the entire planet being on a gold standard. And
what is the gold standard?
The gold standard is basically when money is gold, or at least government currencies backed by gold. But the reason gold became money and not copper, not nickel, not bananas, is that gold is the hardest metal in the world, and it is the hardest metal to increase the supply of. And the reason for that is based in chemistry. So gold is indestructible. You can't destroy gold in any meaningful sense. It's been accumulating stockpiles for thousands of years. You know, the gold that was worn by Nefertiti back in ancient Egypt is today probably in somebody's necklace or in somebody's gold coin. It's still there. So for thousands of years, humans have been digging for gold. They dig it out of the ground, they refine it, and then they put it in a jewelry or a coin, and then it just stays there. It gets melted down into new other forms. You know, the jewelry gets turned into coins, or coins get turned into bars. But it's just stockpiles that are accumulating. On the other hand, every year we get better at our technology of looking for gold. You know, there's more people all over the world. The population increases, the technology improves. So we keep finding more and more gold, and we keep making the stockpiles bigger. However, because we're constantly adding to a stockpile that is not being devalued, that is not being consumed, because there's no way of consuming gold. You can't eat it, you can't burn it, it doesn't rust. Because of that, we're constantly adding to a constantly growing stockpile. So if you look at the numbers, you see over the last 100 years, we've got pretty reliable data on gold production worldwide. We see that pretty much gold stockpiles increase at around 1.5% to 2% per year, every year. So yes, we're making more every year, but we're making more, so we're adding to the stockpile. The stockpile grows more. So every year we're adding only around 1.5% to 2%. Compare that to the second hardest metal historically was silver. And that increased historically at around maybe 5% per year or so. Now it probably increases at something like closer to 30% because it's now getting used extensively in industrial uses. So when you use it in industry, you know, when you put silver in a laptop or in a camera or in a machine, effectively, you are consuming the stockpile because it's not used as money. It's taken out of the monetary stockpile. So over the last 150 years, since 1870 in particular, and I discussed this in detail in the Bitcoin standard, what happened in 1870 was Germany won the Franco-Prussian War, and Germany was on a silver standard, but the value of silver was declining. So Germany did something very smart, which is they took their indemnity from France in gold, and used that big chunk of gold to switch to going on a gold standard. And since then, silver's been collapsing in value next to gold. So back then, the price of an ounce of gold was around 15 ounces of silver. Today, it's closer to 100. It's just been declining for the last 150 years. And so because of that, because of the fact that it's lost its monetary role as people shifted toward gold, the value of silver went down, and so it became economical to use it in more and more industrial applications. So the stockpile declines, and then as a result, that weakens its monetary properties more and more and more. So that's why at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 19th century, gold and silver were money. By the end, it was basically only gold. And the countries that were still on a silver standard, China and India in particular, suffered enormously from it because their money was devaluing very quickly next to gold. And so Europeans who would come to China or India were able to buy things at practically a big discount.
So I hope it's okay if I ask very simple, very basic questions. There's few people in this world that are as good as you are at answering very basic, almost ridiculously basic questions. Because I think exploring questions like what is money is a really great way to think from first principles, to really think deeply about this world. So I really appreciate you doing that. When you say standard, what does it mean? When you say silver standard, gold standard, again, with the basic question.
The term really, I think, was based out of gold. The first time this came out was the gold standard because, so I said gold was money at the end of the 19th century, but it wasn't just that everybody was using gold coins and trading with gold coins because that's got a problem of divisibility. So a lot of things are worth less than one gold coin. So how do you buy that thing? And the answer was that you created monetary instruments that were backed by gold. And so currencies, national currencies under the gold standard, were specific units of gold. And that's how a gold standard functioned. Money was gold, but you had pieces of paper that were redeemable in gold. So you could go to the central bank, you could give them the piece of paper, the $100 bill or the $10 bill, and they'll give you gold in exchange. And they give you a specific quantity of gold in exchange. Effectively, the paper was just a receipt for gold.
So the paper exactly represented the amount of gold.
Exactly. That was the plan, or that was what it's supposed to do. But arguably, we never had a pure gold standard because the nature of gold means that the people who are in charge of the gold, they have an enormous amount of power because the gold is concentrated with them. And as long as not everybody shows up at the same time asking for their gold, then you can make more receipts than you have gold. And
sure.
This is
so there's always shady stuff going on, but at least that's the stated goal, is the receipts should exactly represent the amount of gold there. And also when you say standard, it means that governments sort of publicly stated that this is the main way of making transactions that are monetary. So this is the money. This is the official money that you should be using if you live in this country.
Yes, although I would say it's more like the other way around. It's not that the governments established gold as money. It's more like gold gave the governments the credibility for their currencies. Sure. So governments were not the ones that made gold money. Gold has been money before states were invented. States, if you have a government and you'd like to have some legitimacy and you'd like to be able to deal with other governments on an equal footing, you had to go by the gold standard. You had to have a currency that was redeemable in gold so that you could trade with the rest of the world, so that people could, in your country, use that currency. So it's not that governments were choosing gold. It's more like they were having to adapt their own currencies to gold in order to give their currencies credibility.
So there's a dance there, though, because if they had to, then why did they switch away from it after? So there is a dance where the governments, the people pressure. So first of all, the basic characteristics of the hard money pressures the governments and the people in terms of what should be used. Then the people, based on their community, the network effects, the way the narratives they tell each other, all that kind of stuff, they pressure the governments to take on a particular money. Then the governments, they like power, they like control, all those kinds of things. They pressure the people and tell different kinds of narratives. So there's a dance going on in this evolution of what technology to use for a monetary system. So the reason I don't know if governments had to, because they clearly didn't have to, because they eventually moved away from it. But there was pressure probably.
Yeah, but I mean, even after they moved away from it, central banks until today, they still hold a lot of gold reserves. In fact, if you look at 1914, when the world really went off the gold standard, the amount of gold reserves held by central banks was a tiny fraction of what it was. As time went on, central banks accumulated more and more gold. What ended up happening is they prevented their citizens from using the gold, but they continued to use it. So gold continued to be money up until 1971 because effectively the world was on a dollar standard and the dollars were backed by gold. But then after 1971, even then, central banks continued to accumulate gold because why would you as a central bank want to accumulate pieces of paper effectively, or credit liabilities of another central bank that can produce them infinitely? And it's a lesson that's becoming more and more obvious to governments today, as we see U.S. sanctions taking, say, Russian reserves or Afghanistani reserves. And this is why, we see China and Russia have accumulated a lot of gold over the last 10, 20 years.
So just to return to the question of definitions. So what is hard money versus soft money?
Yes. So hard, I mean, it's a relative thing, but the hardness refers to the difficulty of producing more units of the money supply. So an easy money would be a money that is relatively easy to make. So you can increase the supply by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% or something like that. So pretty much all commodities, all market commodities other than gold and silver, they're easy money and they're not suitable as a monetary medium because they're being consumed. So if you look at, in the Bitcoin standard, I mentioned this metric called the stock to flow ratio, which is the ratio of the annual production, the flow, to the stockpile, the existing stockpiles. If you look at all the other metals, they're easy money because they're being consumed. So think about how much stockpiles of copper there are in the world today. So copper companies obviously have some stockpiles of copper. Major copper consumers will have stockpiles of copper, but the vast majority of copper is essentially on a conveyor belt of production from the mine straight to the consumer good that it's being used for. So the existing stockpiles are roughly in the range of 1 year's production. If you take all of the companies, I don't have exact statistics. It's very difficult to get these, but it's roughly in the same range. Like if copper production were to stop completely today, we'll have about a year's production stored in various places. So that makes copper terrible money, because if you started using copper as money, and this is why, a lot of people say, well, money is a collective illusion. Money is a social construct. If we all agree that something is money, then something is money. I think this is completely clueless. And it's usually Marxists who believe this. So obviously no understanding of economics. It's completely clueless, because even if everybody in society decided we wanted to make copper as money, even if we all decided to collectively take part in this hallucination or illusion, it would not make copper money. It would just make everybody who decides to take part in this hallucination poor. That's it. It would make copper miners rich. It would make all of the people who chose copper as money poor, and copper would not be money. It can't work, because what happens is, because of the fact that the stockpiles are so small, if you buy, even if you get the 1,000 richest people in the world, all of the world's billionaires, they get together and they all dump all of the money that they have, all the stocks, all the bonds, all the gold, all of the Bitcoin, everything that they own, they dump it and they buy copper with it. What's going to happen? Price of copper is going to go up a lot. But what's going to stop copper miners from flooding the market with even more copper than what the billionaires bought? Nothing. They're going to dump all of that extra copper production. If the price of copper is going to go up, so, there will be a lot more copper mining than all the other metals. A lot of, nickel companies and gold miners are going to switch to focusing on copper. And then we're going to dump an enormous amount of copper on the market. The value of copper is going to crash. And the people who you chose copper as money are just going to end up with large warehouses of very cheap rusting metal.
So that's a brilliant description, and that kind of pushes towards gold, where the stock to flow ratio, I guess you would say, is 1.5 to 2%, like you mentioned earlier.
Well, that would be like the inverse of the stock to flow. That's the supply growth rate. So the stock to flow is the inverse. It's around 60.
60, got it.
From this clip, we learned that in the 19th century, gold became the preferred form of money because of its durability and scarcity. Saif explained that unlike other metals, gold doesn't wear out and isn't easily found, which made it a reliable choice for backing currencies. He also discussed how silver was once used alongside gold as money but lost its value over time as it became more useful in industries like electronics. Saif highlighted how governments often chose gold-backed money because it gave their currencies credibility. Even after moving away from the gold standard, governments still held onto gold reserves because it's seen as stable. The conversation also touched on the concept of hard money versus soft money. Hard money, like gold, is difficult to increase in supply, while soft money, like copper, can be easily produced, leading to fluctuations in value. Overall, the video taught us about the historical significance of gold in monetary systems and why it's valued for its stability and scarcity. So, what do you think about this conversation? Do you agree with Saif and his arguments? Also, did you learn anything new from this interesting conversation? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, keep learning and keep stacking.